Debuting all the way back in 1989 and still running, infrequently to the dismay of its millions of fans worldwide, Kentaro Miura's Berserk is the finest that epic manga and anime has to offer. First, we have the beloved 1997 hand-drawn anime. The 2012 film trilogy Berserk: The Golden Age arc, which flips back and forth between handmade animation and full 3D CG scenes, met with mixed opinions. Finally, we have the nearly full CG 2016 to 2017 Berserk anime that only the biggest Berserk diehards could enjoy, but we'll get to that later. What's up to all our returning Band of the Hawk soldiers out there, and hello to those joining us for the first time. I'm Brendan with Cartoon Hangover, and today we're discussing the most iconic super not for kids anime out there in Berserk Then vs. Now. Cast off your armor, wipe off the demon blood, and relax. The Legacy. Berserk is the story of Guts, Griffith, and a vaguely medieval world haunted by human-eating monsters called apostles. Having grown up a child soldier, Guts is an unbeatable soldier. He usually makes his way as a mercenary for hire until he meets Griffith, leader of the Band of the Hawk. Charismatic, incredibly talented, and gorgeous, we might add. Guts decides to follow Griffith to hell and back after being bested in a duel by him. With lots of blood and lots of grit, it stands out there as one of the greatest franchises Japan has to offer. Not only is it beloved by fans, but it has been met with an incredible amount of critical acclaim over the years. The manga sold over 1 million copies just in America, and many times that over in Japan. Way before YouTube, the old school anime fans were passionately discussing Guts' adventures when the rest of us were still in diapers. The Western fantasy-inspired manga only drops a new volume every couple of years these days, but people still can't get enough. Of course such a successful series would receive an anime. It's even received a few video games, including the recent Berserk and the Band of the Hawk. But why are there 3 entirely separate Berserk anime adaptations? Even fan favorite Full Metal Alchemist only has 2. And as we said, Berserk's been around a long time. 39 volumes and an almost 30-year and counting lifespan? There's a lot of Berserk to cover. Unfortunately, there still has never been a perfect anime adaptation of Berserk. One of the anime, though well-liked, didn't cover enough of the story. The movies made 15 years later retread the exact same territory that the first show did, stopping at the exact same point. The most recent show, finishing up on June 23rd, 2017, did cover new ground, but was ugly as sin, earning the nickname PS2 Berserk for its unsatisfactory CG. This, of course, is an insult to the PS2 Berserk video game, which looks way better than the most recent anime. The characters. The Black Swordsman, the Branded Swordsman, the 100-Man Slayer, the Struggler, all these names refer to the toughest dude in all of anime. The only anime character we know of who was born from a corpse, grew up a child soldier, and now spends his free time hunting the most vile, despicable, and corrupt demons that Japanese storytellers have ever conceived. Meet Guts, the quintessential anti-hero from Berserk. Or all 3 Berserks. Of course, we can't talk about Guts without talking about Griffith, the White Hawk, the Hawk of Light, Femto. If Guts is the anti-hero, Griffith is the knight in shining armor. One beloved by all, someone who can do no wrong. A leader whose natural charisma alone raised him from poverty to higher and higher social and military standing. His eventual goal, to have his own castle, and maybe something even beyond that. Such a good guy. People like that never do anything wrong, right? Right? Guts and Griffith didn't change from the first 2 Berserk adaptations, although their voice actors did. What makes the characters different in the most recent anime is simply the progression of the character and story events. There were no fundamental character changes, but the story has these characters playing different roles from then to now. Again, spoiler territory. Interestingly, despite being a different production team, the Japanese voice actors from the film trilogy returned for the new TV series. All 3 adaptations have different English voice casts. Let's dive into them. The 1997 anime, aka the good one. In 1997, 9 years after the manga's release, there was a meaty amount of Berserk to adapt, over 10 volumes of dense material, with the manga being consistently released, and the fans loved it. Back then, there was no better time for a Berserk anime. The relatively new at the time animation studio Oriental Light and Magic, a studio most well known for animating every Pokemon movie and updating our very own Bee and Puppy Cat, gifted the world the first Berserk anime, the one that Berserk fans still consider the greatest, especially in the West. Part of the reason for that is that America got its hands on the Berserk anime before they could ever get the manga, legally anyway. Licensed by Media Blasters in 2001, the manga didn't follow through until 2003. For so many people, this show was their first exposure to the Apostle nightmare that is Berserk, and boy did they eat it up. The other reason it's beloved to this day is that, honestly, it's still pretty darn good. While the 1997 Berserk isn't a perfect adaptation, what could be? Kentaro Miura's art style has always been incredibly detailed, and only increasingly so as the years go on. The style of the 1997 Berserk anime does a good job of slightly simplifying the character designs while still retaining Miura's signature style. It captures the grittiness of the manga pretty nicely. CG animation was not the more economically viable option back then. Heck, anime hadn't even entered the digipaint era that plagued the early 2000s. It's all the glorious, bloody, hand-drawn fare you'd ever want. The animation still looks good to this day. Like, if you've read Berserk, you'd have to admit the show really does feel like Berserk. The world's haunting, the characters pained. While ultra-violence was common in the early 1990s OVA, TV anime usually didn't get as violent as Berserk, making it memorable for anyone watching. Susumu Hirasawa, who is most well known for working with the legendary and late Satoshi Kon on nearly all of his works, created a score that only he could create. Susumu's creepy, synthy score and animation that more or less retains the integrity of the manga art leaves the 1997 show a very strong Berserk experience. Even the dub's not too shabby. The biggest problem with the show is simply it doesn't adapt enough of the story. Even when it came out, it ended on a very big cliffhanger that left fans clamoring for more for years. Until 2012 specifically, or so we thought. The films, aka why? Fans had been waiting for well over 10 years for more Berserk. In 2010, when Volume 35 dropped and announced a brand new Berserk anime, they were ecstatic. The overwhelming joy was short-lived though. More details came out revealing that not only would this anime be a 2D, 3D CG hybrid, it was going to be a film trilogy covering the exact same part of the manga that the original anime did. And some hoped more releases would come if the films did well. Honestly, there's not a huge reason to spend lots of time talking about these films. Directed by Toshiyuki Kubooka and produced at Studio 4C, the films were half hand-drawn and half CG, in an effort to use the strengths of both kinds of animation. The 2D stuff was pretty crisp, looks quite good in the HD era of media. Debatably, the style is cleaner than the original series, making it slightly more removed from the original material. The CG certainly wasn't as nice looking as a Pixar movie, or even some video games being released at the time, but it was smooth and serviceable enough. The switching back and forth between the two, however, was understandably frustrating. Our hot take: these films are actually pretty good. They're not essential, but if you're a Berserk fan, it's worth watching for this film's portrayal of the eclipse, Berserk's series-defining event. It's genuinely frightening. Not that the 1997 version didn't do a good job of adapting this sequence, but being the focal point of an entire movie, the film's take really draws the viewer into it. The staff wanted to make more Berserk after these films, but for reasons unknown, it never materialized, at least not under this production. After the two adaptations of the Golden Age arc of Berserk, fans were thirsting for more Berserk. Unfortunately, sometimes you need to be careful what you wish for. 2016 to 2017 Berserk, aka the real tragedy. We don't usually like to be so divisive or negative on cartoon Hangover, but we really don't have a choice right now. The 2016 to 2017 adaptation of Berserk has been universally considered a failure, especially if we're talking about the visuals. It is ugly. There's no other way around it, no way for us to soften it up. The newest Berserk is unpleasant to look at. It's jilted, it's stiff, it's rudimentary, it's bad enough to get in the way of enjoying the rest of the show. Quality aside, the cinematography and visual direction doesn't do it any favors either. Looking at it leaves you only with this feeling of, like, emptiness. There's no point in comparing it to the original manga's art, or even the art of the 1997 show, when the CG looks remarkably worse than a 5-year-old movie trilogy, which didn't have great CG in the first place. Funny enough, it was trying to stay true to the manga's detailed art style that was one of the reasons things ended up so badly. The show's producer wanted to create an entirely 3D CG Berserk. His intentions were good. The argument was that the manga was too detailed to express in 2D animation, so creating reusable high-quality models was the way to go. The studio Gemba had never produced an entire show, so the odds were against them. Without fully getting into it, the production, both monetarily and the actual creation, was riddled with problems. Uncooperative software, problems designing a final art style, and a tight deadline. The staff was forced to compromise significantly. The CG models were originally supposed to be super detailed to retain the manga style as accurately as they could. Instead, well, I mean, you're looking at the clips right now. You can see what we ended up with. You can't blame the fans for being upset. People waited 20 years for this. Finally, we were getting a show that went past the Golden Age arc. We'd get to see some real monster hunting action, some orc slaying, some glorious battles against the grotesque apostles, and maybe most importantly, more of that beautiful, beautiful Griffith. We got all of that, but with a real budget treatment. If there's anything nice to say about the new series, it's that what it adapted pretty faithfully. Sure, it changed some details to make things more concise and skipped a couple of major arcs, but otherwise presents the Berserk story, which is inherently interesting enough that even bad presentation couldn't completely ruin it. Kentaro Miura, the manga author, worked on the scripts, penning a few new scenes and character moments, but they weren't really enough to save the series. No perfect adaptation. Berserk's fanbase is just as diehard as ever. They're upset about this recent show and rightfully worried that the best will never come. For nearly 30 years, they've wanted a good Berserk anime, and to be fair, they got one. What fans really want is the rest of a good, hand-drawn, atmospheric Berserk anime, one that covers the places and events that the comic has literally sailed to this past decade. The Ballad of Guts and Griffith has led many to calling Berserk the best manga of all time, and the fans want a competent adaptation. One didn't cover enough of the series, one retread old territory, and one was just a flat-out disappointment. Seriously, the new Berserk and the Band of the Hawk Warriors game looks better than the most recent show. It's doubtful that we'll ever get a truly perfect anime now, but who knows, maybe in 20 years when the 40th volume of the manga drops, somebody will try again. If you have any interest in Berserk, check out the original show. It's pretty good. We even think that the movies are worth watching. If you watch those and are really clamoring for more, stick with the manga, you'll thank us for it. Thanks for watching Berserk, then versus now. Drop a comment on which Berserk show you think is best. Passionate about the film trilogy? Really love the new series? Let us know. Click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad, and make sure to hit that subscribe button for more from your war comrades at Cartoon Hangover. Before the monsters get you, that is.